Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti, hoping you guys are having a good night. And above all else, that you are looking after yourselves and one another. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to welcome you back to episode two of Is This a Masterpiece? Now, this is an idea that I came up with, and Mr. Ken Cheshire and Mr. Jim Bricker have decided to come along with me on this ride. Now, I have come up with a list of five albums that anyone looking at this list would most likely consider these albums on this list a masterpiece, whether it be the music that's on the album, whether it be the production that goes into the music on the album, whether it be the artwork for the cover, whatever the case is. There are many different variables as to why an album, in this case, is considered a masterpiece. So in episode one, we covered the classic Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band from the Beatles. In episode two, we are covering Steely Dan's Asia. I got Jim's approval from his nod down below there. Now, as I look at my notes here, I'm going to give you a bit of a background on Asia. Asia is Steely Dan's, I just went by my notes here. Uh, Asia is Steely Dan's sixth release. It is a follow-up release to the 1976 album The Royal Scam, sorry, released on September 23rd, 1977 on ABC Records. ABC would be eventually taken over by MCA Records in 1979. Asia was recorded in late 1976 through to July of 1977, and it was recorded at A&R Village Recorder, ABC, Warner Brothers, Producers Workshop, and Sound Lab Studios. So a lot of studios used in this production. Now, Steely Dan are an interesting band to talk about because over the progression of their lifespan, they basically started out as a full out pop and rock band. Um, but as the albums progressed, they slowly morphed into what I would call a jazz fusion, blue-eyed soul, yacht rock, pop rock band. Members would slowly fall off as the years would progress. David Palmer, co-lead vocalist, would leave after the release of Can't Buy a Thrill, 1972. By 1974, after the release of Pretzel Logic, the band would uh, basically cease to tour because the de facto lead members, Donald Fagen and Walter Becker, not Brecker, but Becker, because I made that mistake once before, basically wanted to concentrate on being a studio project. And members such as Jeff Skunk Baxter on guitar, sorry, dealing with a head cold, guys, my apologies, and Denny Diaz, another guitarist for the band, would slowly over the years leave the band, although Denny Diaz would stay on as what they would call a session musician for said album, Asia. Um, now, after my spiel, I will pass over the virtual mic over to, as I see on my screen, to Ken to give his thoughts on Asia. Ken?
Yes. Okay. Asia came out when I was in high school. Um, I had already owned a couple of Steely Dan albums, thoroughly enjoyed them. But Asia just really, it seemed to skip a couple of levels for me. You know, it's just like, whoa, this seems so amazing um, that surely there must be some more at least an album or two before it to chart the progression of this band, and it just wasn't. And there's several reasons for it. One large reason is because at this point, being a studio only band, they really took advantage in the studio of using um, a variety, a large, arguably an army of musicians. Um, uh, and they were known. They took quite a bit of time to record this album. And on any given song, for instance, on a guitar solo, they would have several different guitarists record a solo for the song, and then later on choose which recording they were going to use. And on any given song, it was more than just the guitar parts too. The To read the overall roster of studio musicians on this album um, reads like a who's who of studio jazz musicians at the time, both new and well established. Um, uh, and they would bring in an artist on a song or just 8 bars for somewhere, fitting in a song.
Mhm.
Then you add into that their love of jazz, which is really a heavy influence in the songwriting here. And uh, and I think the title song Asia is kind of a perfect example of that. Um, with several motifs that run through it, um, allowing their musicians just to cut loose in a couple of spots. Um, there's a story of ooh, I can't remember which song it is. Jim can correct me. Where Fagan said, "No slapping on the bass."
Peg,
Is Peg? Okay, yeah.
peg.
Like,
Yep,
No slapping, just
Chuck
play it.
Rainey.
Yeah,
yep.
and so he went ahead and did it anyway, and it worked so well. It proved Fagan wrong
But there's a way he did it.
in what he did. Yeah, and so whereas they were heavily structured, they still allowed each of the musicians to play to their strengths. And I've always wanted them to um, release this album as in a form of software with all of the recordings, so you could actually remix it and hear what the other solos and stuff sound like.
Build
Okay.
your own
Um,
Asia. Yes.
yeah, there is um, there's a documentary series called Classic Album. You can find most of them on YouTube. I recommend the one where Fagan and Becker and several of the musicians talk about the recording of this album, because it's fascinating. Um, Becker and Fagan did kind of, rule with an iron fist, but
Mhm.
holy cow, you can't, at least I can't argue with the results of this. Um, you know, um, this album is better than maybe it should have. I like watching reaction videos on YouTube of, rappers, R&B artists, whatever, listening to these songs for the first time. And even though it's not necessarily in their genre, they're just absolutely blown away by it.
Yep.
Um, because of, uh, I've never really thought of some of these songs being funky. I just thought they were just, really good, jazz rock. I appreciate the tight vocals that they bring into these, the instrumental work. The production is just absolutely incredible. There again, all these elements come together, like kind of like what I said about Sergeant Pepper. It's a perfect storm of all these different elements coming together to make this album so good. Um, uh, Jim is more intimate with some of the deeper aspects of it, but yeah, It's a great album. Just a great album for so many reasons.
Okay.
Mhm.
Jim.
Well, now, um,
What Ken said, right?
yeah, what Ken said
And a
plus.
lot more, yeah.
Um, a couple little things just to add under there. Ken was talking about the uh, murderer's row of musicians who are on this album.
Yeah.
And, it is true. There are 7 tracks on this album, and the album has 6 different drummers. So there's one drummer that appears on 2 tracks. All the rest, it's a unique drummer. And
Yeah.
what Steely Dan would do would basically bring in a drummer and then bring in, whoever they would have,
Yeah.
on, guitar, keyboards, bass, rhythm guitar, whatever.
And
And
just
basically that band would they would just play with the drummer, and they would have this huge session basically just to get the drum track.
that's right. That's right. I was going to say that, but you stole my thunder. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry. It's bound to
No, it's
happen
fine.
when
It's fine.
oh
It's
my gosh.
Thief.
Okay. Steve, how dare I?
I
So
can't get my
let's kind
words out. So go ahead.
of let's break this album down a
Shall
bit. And we're
we?
not going to break it down track by track, but we're going to break it down into like the components of what go into making an album, kids. So gather around, get comfortable. We're going to have a little chat with Uncle Jim here.
Do
So
tell.
the first thing you've got is composition. Thank you, Ken. Your attentiveness is appreciated. Um, just the basic songs themselves, the way that they are crafted, the melodies, um, the just basic framework of where the song is going to go. These are just fantastic pop songs just on the surface if you just look at them as pieces of music and just a tempo, um, chords, how they flow from one to the next, the way the melody line, just look at Peg, I know I love you better. I mean, there's that whole pogo stick is just brilliant in terms of how they put that together. So you've got an album of 7 outstanding compositions, and I am saying all 7. Um, Performance.
Yes.
Yes. So the next thing you got to do is you got to, well, performance and arrangement. They probably go hand in hand, and it might be a chicken and an egg thing of, the performance influences the arrangement, and then the arrangement will dictate how they want the performances to go.
Yeah.
But basically, what Steely Dan was looking for, Don and Walter and producer Gary Katz, they were looking for the perfect sound for that track. Fagan was just like this savant who had a very distinct sonic picture in his head of what he wanted for a song and how that would make that work.
That's right.
And like I said, they would bring in these murderers row of musicians, and then they would begin to tweak how it would come together from an arrangement standpoint to get the exact song that they wanted, to get it exactly how they would want it to sound. Which brings to the fourth and fifth components, which are like production and engineering. So Gary Katz and the other lead engineer, I maybe Ken can help me with who did the engineering work on this. Elliot Shiner, probably. Um, um, they were the ones tweaking the knobs. They were the one deciding how much to emphasize, the these 2 saxophones over the trombone. And
Hmm.
they would take, the arrangement that was put together by Tom Scott, but they're the ones who were putting the mics in the right place, making sure that everything was balanced on the tape so that it would, come together. And then finally, what is this? The sixth thing? Yeah. So the sixth thing that would come together is just the packaging. We talked before in the previous episode on the Beatles how the Sgt. Pepper album kind of broke the mold and set the new standard in terms of gatefold color, um, lyrics, ephemera that's put in with the album as well. Remember, there were little paper badges and things
Yeah.
that were put in with Sgt. Pepper as well. The
Yeah.
the packaging on Asia from not only just the basics of it's very clear who plays on what songs. You've got these two great sets of liner notes from, you know, one is a guy from ABC Records, and the other one is probably a fabrication put together by Becker and Fagan, if I recall correctly. Um, and just the photo and the design itself. I mean, it's just class. There is not a classier record
You
to
mean of
my
the
knowledge that exists.
you mean of
Excuse me.
the geisha girl on the cover of yeah, okay.
Of Asia, yeah, and then just the fact that that image is so stunning and so stark that all you really need on the back are the titles of the seven cuts, and that's it. You don't need a lot of other stuff to go with it because the photo is such a statement in and of itself.
Uh,
So because of these six elements, the composition, performance, arrangement, production, engineering, packaging, it all goes into putting the album out. And for me, this is just a it's a no-brainer. I've gone on record as saying that Asia for me is the greatest album of all time, and you know there's a couple other that kind of bump against it, but for me this is just the perfect culmination and amalgam of all these different components coming together just to make something absolutely pure and perfect. So from Black Cow to Asia to Deacon Blues, which is the song I like least on the album, doesn't mean I don't love it, just I like it the least. Peg, Home at Last, I Got the News, which is a bit of funkiness that I just love to death. And Josie, I mean, yes, to me, this album is just a flat out, masterpiece in 40 minutes of black lacquer. I, damn, I love this record.
okay, so Jim, maybe I got my signals mixed. Are you trying to say that Asia is a masterpiece?
You know what? I would suggest A, that you go for a regular ear cleaning, and two, yes, that is what I'm saying. It is, in fact, a masterpiece.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're done for the night. No, okay, it's fine. Um, okay, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, my view on Asia. I have gotten flack, first of all, from various viewers on my view of Black Cow relegating it to an honorable mention. I have listened to the album again. I have all of the 70s albums of the original run, including Gaucho. I have reassessed my opinion on Black Cow. I think that it is a fantastic track, melodic, funked up piece of soul. Forgive me. I think that Asia as an album, I think that this is Steely Dan's apex. I think that, forgive me, guys, I'm dealing with a head cold and a cough, that this is the album that they were striving for to produce. They were morphing, as I said, into a jazz fusion, blue-eyed soul, yacht rock, pop rock band, and everything came to the forefront on Asia. At this point in time, they were not concerned with a top 10 hit or even a top 40 hit. They wanted to go into the studio and make an album to the best of their ability and to damn and to hell with whoever said anything against it. And not that ABC at the time were not on their backs about delivering an album, but they were giving them enough leeway to see what they could do.
Yeah,
And luckily, they delivered. I mean, and even when you hear the stories on the classic album series about the making of the album, the fact that when you got a call for a session for Steely Dan in the morning, you dreaded it because you knew you weren't going to be there in the afternoon. So on the reverse side of that coin, if you got a call for an afternoon session for Steely Dan, you were doing, cartwheels because you knew that you were going to be there most likely for that, you were going to make it onto the album, right? The fact that they were using musicians like Bernard Purdy, Steve Gadd, Rick Marana on drums, uh, Victor Feldman on marimba, on Asia Alone, just beautiful. This album, from Black Cow to Asia, the majesty of what is Asia. Uh, Deacon Blues, beautiful. A slab of New York life. Okay. When you hear this album, you can just imagine yourself walking down a New York street or in Manhattan on a Saturday afternoon and just soaking in all the sights and sounds and smells and the environment of what is there. That is what this album represents to me. Peg is a good slab of pop rock confection with Michael McDonald on, backup vocals. And the fact that he has said in this documentary that they would make you do a vocal take 20 times. And if they felt that a certain nuance wasn't there, they would make you do it again and again and again. You maybe would have felt that you did the best you could, but they would say, "Oh, you screwed up again. Let's do it again. Try it again." And they were taskmasters. They were just perfectionists. Um, Songs like "Home at Last," fine. Well, the one, uh, I guess you call it weak link in the chain would be "I Got the Blues." Not that you know it's a bad song. It's just I don't put it in the same echelon as I put the others. Josie is a fantastic piece of work. Um, I just think that this is you know, albums like Sgt. Pepper and Dark Side of the Moon, those were benchmarks that other artists strive to achieve after these albums came out. And to me, um, this is Steely Dan, Sgt. Pepper, or Dark Side of the Moon. Now, is that a masterpiece? No, no.
Good
I
night, everybody.
I love the album. I think it's great. I do think that I Got the News is the one weak track on the album. Not that it's a bad track. I just think that, I mean, it's just not on the same level as the other tracks are on the album. Um, I do feel that they have hit their pinnacle with this album because Gaucho, to me, was just a continuation of what they were doing on Asia. And like I've said with Gaucho, when you've got Patty Austin and Valerie Simpson, for backup vocalists, even on this album, you've got Renetta Fields, at your disposal. You've got the cream of the crop in terms of musicians and vocalists.
No.
And this is my question I'm going to put to you too. Uh, is there an artist that is, how can I put this? Um, is every artist supposed to have masterpiece of an album?
Ken,
No.
There you go.
Mm.
I agree with Ken. I mean, you could probably pick out the best album from someone's discography, but I don't think everyone
Doesn't
is
mean it's a
supposed to have a
masterpiece.
masterpiece.
There you
No.
go. There you go. That's what keeps an artist striving to keep pushing, right? To see if they could do an album that would be considered a masterpiece, right? Like you always keep pushing for the next best possible thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is a good album. I don't think it's a masterpiece per se. I do think it's up there in terms of production, songwriting, performance. you know. But is it a masterpiece? Unfortunately, I don't think so. I'm gonna get
Did
hate
we get Ken's
messages.
ruling on that?
Sorry, Ken, did we get your ruling on this?
Well, for me, it is.
Okay.
To me, this album affects me the way that you say that Sergeant Pepper does for you.
Okay.
Yeah. But also as a musician, um, I can listen to what's being done, particularly in the piano parts. And even when I see these piano parts written out on score, um, it, it's as a musician, I find it just absolutely mind-boggling. And when it comes to music, the word that comes to mind for me is sophistication. There is something
Yep.
about this album that is just incredibly sophisticated in all those ways, Jim, that you were talking about: songwriting, recording, production, packaging. It just doesn't let up, anywhere in this. Um, and and yeah, the Michael McDonald talking about recording um, the harmonies for Peg. He could not comprehend what those chords were,
What they were
so
going
they
for, yeah.
recorded it one at a time,
Yeah.
each of those harmonic lines one at a time, because um, I've tried to analyze it, and I can't figure out what those chords are. I mean, they're not just regular 1 4 5.
Yeah.
These are jazz chords and jazz progressions, and so both just as a listener, but also as a musician, it just it's just everything about this. This is my favorite. Um, by far, it's my favorite Steely Dan album. But just overall, it's probably one of my favorite albums overall. But a lot of that's because this takes me back to high school, and this is what I call a time machine album.
Well, like I had said before, this album for you brings up certain memories
Sure,
and emotions,
yep,
and that's valid in and of itself,
sure,
So yeah.
Yeah, this album for me, it doesn't take me back to high school because I'm a little bit younger than Mr. Cheshire, but it does take me back to junior high. And I remember the day that I went out and bought this album just on the strength of hearing Peg. And I said, well, I got to hear this whole thing. This just sounds amazing. And I took it home and put it on my dad's stereo. My dad had, you know, wasn't an avid music listener, but when he had music on in the house, it was Sinatra, it was the Ella Fitzgerald Verve songbook albums,
yeah,
it was some modern jazz quartet, it was the Herb Alpert arrangement of A Taste of Honey. So these were the things that were sort of in my soul and DNA from when I heard Asia proper, and it's like all that stuff just sort of come came together,
Together, yeah.
and it was just one of those moments where my head just blew off of my body, and it's
Almost for
like
you,
this is
yeah.
the music I've been waiting for my entire life,
Okay.
at a tender age of 12.
So this
So
for you was your perfect storm, as it were.
mhm,
yeah,
Okay. Okay. You
yeah,
see, for me,
absolutely.
the reason why I can attach myself to this album is I grew up with three older sisters. So music was always on in the house. And,
Yep.
I remember hearing Peg on the radio. I remember having the single for Peg. I don't know where it went to, but I remember that stuff. So this is also memories for me as well.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, all these points are valid, in terms
sure,
of the way it makes you feel, the emotions, the appreciation for the music, for the arrangements, for the album cover, everything. It's all valid.
yeah.
So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Episode 2 of Is This a Masterpiece? Please put down in the comments below whether or not you believe that Asia from Steely Dan is in fact a masterpiece. Or if there's another album from Steely Dan in their short catalog, I believe they have one, 7 albums in the original run, or 9 overall. Which album that you believe is indeed a masterpiece, if there is one for you?
I
Um,
know there are a lot of people who would feel like Can't Buy a Thrill is their
Yeah.
masterpiece. And, Asia is just too slick and too
Bill would be
schlocky.
one of
But
them. Bill
Yeah.
Schuster would be
exactly,
one
our
of them.
dear friend, Mr. Schuster. Yes.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. So again, ladies and gentlemen, please put down in the comments below your belief and your opinion on this album, whether or not it is indeed a masterpiece. And yeah, there are no right or wrong answers, just opinion, right? So I want to thank Mr. Ken Cheshire and Mr. Jim Bricker for again joining me on episode 2 of this wonderful musical journey that we're on. Please click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content I've got coming up. We will see you soon with episode 3 of Is This a Masterpiece? All right. Please look after yourselves and one another. And unlike me, do not catch this head cold because it is a bitch to get rid of. So I will see you soon. Well, we will see you soon with more episodes. Bye for now.